Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. I just got this book in the mail recently and we have to talk about this. For those of you unfamiliar with John McWhorter, he's a linguist who teaches at Columbia University and he's a wildly popular science communicator and linguistic outreach guy. When people find out I'm a linguist, they ask me if I know John. He's been somewhat controversial both within linguistics for a take that is sometimes characterized as calling English a Creole language and outside of linguistics for his takes on society, which I more than sometimes disagree with on academic grounds. But that's not what this video is about. I didn't used to know John outside of seeing him at conferences, but there's actually a kind of funny story about this. About 5 years ago, he wrote a book with the cheeky title Woke Racism, which at the time I thought was a bit hyperbolic. I publicly criticized his hysterical language when he said that a certain strand of the far left was tarring and feathering and defenestrating people. And I particularly criticized his statement that the, quote, barbarians are at the gates. Well, less than 5 years later, the institution where he teaches literally closed its actual physical gates to prevent access after a radical Islamist contingent seized a building and attempted to defenestrate a university employee. This year, they seized and attempted to burn down the library. I decided that it's probably a good rule of thumb to not be on the side that supports book burning, so I reached out to John and I told him I owed him an apology. By the way, if you don't like my characterization of that, that's fair. Leave me a comment. I do try to read all the comments, so there's a very real chance that if you try hard enough, you can hurt my feelings. So have at it. Anyway, turns out he hadn't seen my comments, which is for the best, but he had seen my research on the N-words and on court transcriptionists. Both of these were studies where my colleagues and I found that basically people don't always understand Black English, and it can have negative effects, especially in the judicial system where the person writing down what you said might not fully understand what you said, and what they write down becomes the legal fact of what you said. So we met up for coffee and discussed both the state of the field of linguistics, dumpster fire, and the dumpster was filled with lithium-ion batteries, and also, for a significant portion of the time, pronouns. When he finally released this book, he sent me a copy saying I'm cited in it. Turns out I didn't make it through the editor's cuts, but there's a whole discussion on page 113 or so that builds on some of my work. That kind of thing happens and is no big deal, but he was very gracious about it. But the whole book is a trip. So today I'm going to give you just a little taste of pronoun trouble. What's particularly intense is that third person singular they is basically an afterthought. There's so much else to discuss. So buckle up because it's pronoun time. If you're playing the home game, maybe don't this time. I'm Dr. Taylor Jones, and this is all pronouns all the time. This is Language Jones. Today's video is sponsored by Babbel. Babbel is one of the top language learning apps in the world, and it's not hard to see why. I'm planning a viaggio in Italia, that's Italian for a voyage to Italy, and Babbel has been something that I actually use in the process of preparing.
Sono di Palermo.
Di dove sei?
They have bite-sized lessons I can do anywhere, but they're designed by actual teachers and feature both real audio, not AI-generated dreck, and images that help boost vocabulary retention and memorization and not, oh, I don't know, AI-generated talking bears. I've really enjoyed their podcasts, which I listen to while doing the dishes or walking to the cafe. And I love this series about Italian cities, and I'm incorporating some of what I learned into my trip planning. I also love the fact that they have short lessons, so I'm not committed to a full hour of classroom study, but I can still feed my language Jones when I'm jonesing. Some of you are just now getting the name of the channel. If you'd like to get started in any of these languages, click the link or scan the QR code to get up to 60% off. Now, back to the video. So John McWhorter is a very interesting guy. He's a Black linguist, and yes, he's written about Black English, but he'll be the first to tell you that he doesn't speak it and he doesn't have much interest in writing about it. He's a big Germanicist, and as far as I can tell, a huge fan of Yiddish. He's got an encyclopedic knowledge of the history of English and the occasional perspective that's somewhere between a minority opinion and a spicy hot take, including a few in the book. Now, one of the blurbs in the book says the book is fun, but sounds like it would be more fun to be a guest at a fancy dinner party where John was another guest. And I thought, that's odd. And then I read the book, and yeah. As a linguist, I can recognize what he's talking about in technical terms, but he almost never uses the technical terms, instead opting to explain regular sound shifts and grammatical paradigms with easy-to-understand metaphors, so a layman can get a handle on what he's talking about. He careens between highbrow and lowbrow, often in the same sentence, so the book touches on the difference between a Sancerre and a Sauvignon Blanc to a sommelier one moment. One gets the impression McWhorter is the wine snob in question, and Elmer Fudd in the next moment. And it's the same with English, touching on Chaucer and Shakespeare and Old English translations of the Bible, but also love letters and the non-standard speech of street urchins in the 1800s in places that aren't London. The book is about the history of English pronouns and touches on basically anything related to pronouns we have now. However, he's clear-eyed about what pronouns we have, so it's not just I, we, you, he, she, it. He talks about you guys and all y'all. He talks about singular they. He talks about how she is kind of a weird pronoun historically and should have turned out as something else. He talks about first person and a. The longest chapter by far, surprisingly, is on you. Nobody's fighting over you because we're too busy getting at each other's throats about they and neopronouns and whatever. But he points out that you used to be part of a much fuller paradigm. You is the object form of ye, and those were the plurals. Plurals, compared to thou and thee, which makes sense because thou and thee are pretty obviously related to the informal you in German, du, and other languages like French, tu, and Russian, dui. If that blew your mind, wait until you get a load of this. I actually didn't know this at all. There were social asymmetries in when you use thou and you, kind of like the politeness considerations around tu and vous in French. So you could use you for the plural, but also someone of higher station, or to create social distance. One huge thing I got out of this book is a new appreciation of the subtlety of Shakespeare. McWhorter demonstrates how characters use a choice between you and thou to signal all sorts of drama. This just washes over modern ears, but there's all sorts of cool things going on. He uses a scene from Othello to illustrate unspoken, subtle coldness signaled by using you to one's wife rather than the expected thou. And then thou after things defrost a little. And I also learned that there was a social asymmetry where a wife would be expected to call her husband you. Anyway, there's tons and tons of really interesting information about the history of the English language in a careening, madcap jumble of the classiest of high-class allusions thrown in with Jurassic Park and Looney Tunes. I thought it was an absolute delight, and I highly, highly recommend it. If you'd like to pick up a copy, I have a link in the description. I don't want to give away the whole book, but I do want to just list some of the topics he covers. So he covers the shift in English pronouns towards a simplified system. He talks about clusivity and the difference between inclusive and exclusive we. That's we including you and we and not you. He talks about the dramatic reduction of the second person pronominal paradigm to just you and the pressures on that system that result in us constantly redeveloping ways of expressing what we've lost, whether it's y'all, all y'all, you guys, and so on. He talks about how our third-person pronouns were basically replaced with Norse third-person pronouns and how there's all sorts of weirdness going on with basically everything, including the things that seem normal, like she. He of course mentions the use of the N-word, but he situates it in a much broader context around social signaling, effectively comparing it to something like your humble servant. The whole book is an absolute delight, like I said before, for more or less exactly the same reasons I didn't much care for woke racism. He's having an absolute blast with language and cultural allusions while writing it, and in this case, I can verify that what he's saying is spot on. When he wades into sociology in his other books, things get a little less solid. I don't recall a mention of pronominal bro or the associative plural no, but it's such a rich topic of discussion, some things are bound to be left out. So it's already that time. Leave me a comment with your favorite pronoun and why. Link to the book below, and if you like what I'm doing with the channel, you can support it on YouTube with super thanks or over on Patreon at patreon.com/languagejones. Please leave me a comment, they are great for the algorithm, and subscribe if you haven't already. Until next time, happy reading.